I still remember the morning the wind smelled like cedar and trouble. The kind of day that looks peaceful from the outside, sunlight cutting through oak branches, birds fussing over the feeder, but carries a silence too perfect to trust. We just moved into our dream home at the edge of Willow Bend Estates, a quiet neighborhood tucked between rolling hills and a half-finished golf course. My wife, Emily, was unpacking boxes in the kitchen, humming like she always did when she felt at peace. I was out front, tightening a loose board on the fence, thinking maybe, for once, life would just stay quiet. Then she appeared. A silver SUV rolled up, spotless and smug, stopping so close to our driveway I could smell the perfume before the door opened. Out stepped a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, clipboard clutched to her chest like a badge of honor. She smiled, that kind of smile you give someone before telling them what they've done wrong. "Morning. I'm Karen, president of the Willow Bend HOA," she announced. "Just wanted to welcome you both to our community. We'll need your membership paperwork by Friday. I can go over the fees now if you'd like." I blinked. "We're actually just outside the HOA line," I said carefully. The realtor was clear, "Our property's independent." Her smile twitched. "Oh, that's a common mistake," she replied sweetly, "the kind of sweet that rots your teeth. This whole area falls under our oversight now. It's about maintaining standards." Emily stepped out from the porch, wiping her hands on her jeans. Calm, polite, but with that steel behind her eyes that most people never see. "Ma'am, we're not interested in joining any HOA," she said evenly. Karen's expression froze like glass. Then she turned it into a tight, brittle laugh. "Oh, well, that's not really how this works, dear." The breeze carried a faint clang of construction from the next street over, hammers, saws, and somewhere beneath it all, a tension that didn't belong in a neighborhood built on promises of peace. I watched as Karen climbed back into her SUV, that clipboard flashing in the sun like a warning. She drove off smiling. But not the kind of smile that ends a conversation, the kind that says this isn't over. And I remember thinking, standing in that perfect morning light, some people mistake power for purpose. Before Karen's clipboard cast its shadow over our mornings, Willow Bend Estates felt like the kind of place where people still waved to each other just because it felt good. Kids rode their bikes in looping figure-eights across cul-de-sacs, sprinklers hissed across green lawns, and the air carried that lazy, summer smell of cut grass and barbecue smoke. It was the kind of neighborhood that promised quiet after years of noise, and for us, that quiet meant everything. Emily and I had spent the last decade chasing peace. She'd been in law enforcement her whole adult life, rising through the county ranks one disciplined step at a time. People saw the uniform and thought they knew her, firm, distant, intimidating. But off-duty, she was the gentlest kind of strong. The type who still stopped to move turtles off the road. The type who remembered everyone's dog's name before their owners. I used to joke that she could talk down a hurricane if she gave it enough time. When we bought this place, it wasn't just another move. It was a promise, to slow down, breathe again, maybe plant something that didn't have to grow around chaos. We picked the lot specifically outside the HOA boundary. She wanted privacy, I wanted freedom. Together, we wanted peace. At first, the neighbors seemed wonderful. The Johnsons next door brought over peach cobbler the day we arrived. A retired veteran named Don helped me fix a loose gate post the following week. Every morning, folks jogged by with a polite, "Good morning," and a smile that felt genuinely earned. It was small-town warmth wrapped in white picket order. But even in paradise, there are cracks if you look close enough. The first hint came in the form of a neatly folded letter tucked under our front doormat. No return address, no signature, just a typed note that read, "Most of us believe in community harmony. It's easier if everyone follows the same rules." It wasn't threatening, not really. Just off. Emily read it twice and set it aside. "Someone trying to recruit us, that's all," she said. But the way her eyes narrowed told me she didn't believe her own words. Then came the whispers. Subtle things, a couple of neighbors hesitating before waving, or the mailman mentioning that some residents weren't happy about that new couple at the edge of the lane. I laughed it off, assuming it was small-town chatter, the kind that blows over after a few weeks. Emily didn't. She noticed the same silver SUV circling past the house every few days. Always slow. Always watching. Still, we carried on. I worked from home, she split her time between the station and the property. On weekends, we'd sit out on the porch swing, sipping coffee as the morning mist burned off the fields. That's what I loved about her, even when something bothered her, she never let it steal the quiet. Then one Thursday morning, while Emily was at work, I noticed a man in a fluorescent vest walking along our fence line. Clipboard, rolled up blueprints, measuring tape slung over his shoulder. He moved slow, like someone counting steps. When I asked what he was doing, he barely looked up. "Surveying," he said flatly. "Property review for the Willow Bend Homeowners Association." My stomach sank. "This lot's outside the HOA boundary," I said. He shrugged. Not for long. That night, when Emily came home, she didn't even take off her uniform before walking straight to the file cabinet where we kept our closing papers. She laid out the plat map, the deed, and the survey certificate, all clear as daylight. Our land was independent. No gray areas. No shared restrictions. She stared at those papers for a long moment, then at me. "Someone's trying to redraw lines," she said softly. The porch light buzzed behind her. Outside, crickets hummed beneath the warm summer air, but suddenly, everything felt colder. We didn't know it then, but that simple act, a stranger measuring what wasn't his, was the first move in a quiet war we never asked to fight. And somewhere out there, behind the hum of sprinklers and the hum of gossip, Karen was already planning her next visit. It started with a rumor, one of those soft, passing things that seemed too absurd to chase. Don, our neighbor, mentioned it first over the fence one evening. He was trimming his hedges, and I was rolling the trash bins to the curb when he said, half under his breath, "Heard they're annexing your side of the lane into the HOA next quarter. Supposedly voted on it last week." I laughed. "That's not even legal. Our property isn't within their jurisdiction." He frowned, hedge clippers paused mid-air. Didn't stop them from sending letters to a few others. Something about a boundary realignment initiative. You might want to look into it. That night, Emily and I spread the mail across the kitchen table, 5 envelopes, each from the Willow Bend Estates Association. The language was slick, polished, and full of legal smoke. Pursuant to new subdivision policy updates, community integration protocols, the words danced around one simple truth: Karen and her board were trying to absorb us, and a few other houses, into their control. It wasn't just about power. It was about money. HOA fees, fines, influence, the small empire Karen had been building behind those smiling neighborhood newsletters. Emily's expression didn't change, but her silence spoke louder than words. She flipped through the letters again, then pointed to a line buried near the bottom, "Approved in special meeting held June 14th, by unanimous board decision." She looked up. That's the day we were moving in. The realization hit slow, like cold water creeping under the door. While we were unpacking boxes and dreaming about fresh starts, a group of strangers had been voting to decide what rules we'd have to live by, without our consent, without notice, without care. Over the next few days, Emily quietly started asking questions at the county office. She'd been in the system long enough to know where paper trails hid. What she found turned my confusion into disbelief. Karen had submitted a proposed map amendment, an expansion of HOA boundaries, using an old zoning document that was never approved. The signatures on it? All board members, and one from the county planning assistant who no longer worked there. It was a web of forgery disguised as bureaucracy. When Emily told me, her voice was calm, but her hands trembled just slightly, a rare crack in her steady exterior. "She's falsifying jurisdiction," she said quietly. "Trying to make it look legitimate before the new property tax cycle." I stared at the floor, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. All this, the letters, the whispers, the surveyors, it was never about keeping lawns tidy or protecting the neighborhood's image. It was about control. A calculated grab for authority cloaked in community spirit. And worse, our neighbors were starting to believe her. The next morning, as I went to get the mail, I noticed a few people across the street, the Johnsons, the new couple with the white SUV, talking in low tones. The conversation stopped when they saw me. Smiles vanished. Curtains shifted. It was subtle, but it stung more than an outright insult. Inside, Emily was standing at the window, watching too. "She's turning them," she said softly. "It's easier to win a war when everyone believes you already have." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The house felt smaller that day, walls closer, air heavier. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Finally, she turned to me. Her eyes weren't angry, just resolute. "I won't fight in anger," she said, her tone steady as a gavel. "I'll wait." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even defiance. It was something deeper, a promise of justice that didn't need to shout to be heard. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across our porch, I realized Karen had no idea who she'd just tried to outmaneuver. Because when Emily waited, she didn't wait idly, she watched, she gathered, and when the time came, she struck with truth sharper than any weapon. Silence became our strategy. In the days after Emily's vow, the air between us changed, quieter, but charged, like static before lightning. She didn't rant or rage. She moved with intention. Every morning before dawn, she'd brew her coffee, tuck her hair back, and sit at the dining table surrounded by papers, her badge lying off to the side like a reminder she didn't need to flash to command authority. I watched her from the doorway, the glow from her laptop flickering across her face. County databases, public records, zoning maps, all open, cross-referenced, highlighted in layers of color-coded tabs. It was the same precision she'd used in investigations, only this time the crime scene was our neighborhood. "Look here," she said one night, spinning the screen toward me. "This is the original plat from 1998. Our parcel was designated unincorporated agricultural land before Willow Bend even existed. Karen's new boundary proposal uses a digital overlay. See this blue line? She traced it with her finger. It's been shifted 30 feet north. Just enough to include us. 30 feet. That's all it took to rewrite ownership. We spent nights combing through the county archive, pages of scanned documents buried in digital dust. Emily filed a quiet public records request under her own name, not as sheriff. She wanted no bias, no whispers. It took days before the clerk emailed back, attaching files so large they nearly crashed the computer. Among them, a recent petition signed by concerned residents supporting the boundary change. Half the signatures were people who'd moved away years ago. One was a deceased resident. Another? Misspelled and duplicated. Fraud, plain and simple. While Emily handled the paperwork, I played my part on the ground. I started casual conversations, at the hardware store, the mailbox, the coffee stand near the entrance to the neighborhood. Listening, not asking. That's how I learned Karen had been holding informal HOA briefings in her home every Friday evening. Wine glasses, catered snacks, and plenty of gossip disguised as governance. She says you two are holding up progress, one neighbor admitted with a guilty shrug. That you're refusing to pay your fair share for maintenance. Funny, I said, smiling. Did she mention we're not in her HOA? The neighbor blinked, confused. That was the moment I realized Karen's real power wasn't the HOA charter, it was narrative control. She'd turned the story of our independence into rebellion. And people love a villain more than a fact. Emily's counterattack was slow and surgical. She met with the county zoning board under the pretense of routine jurisdiction verification. I tagged along, playing the silent husband. The meeting room smelled like old paper and burnt coffee. Behind those long tables sat people who didn't like trouble, and that's exactly what Karen's name now represented. When the zoning director scrolled through the latest amendment files, his brows furrowed. This wasn't approved through our office, he muttered. There's no authorization seal, no board sign-off. Who submitted this? Emily leaned forward slightly, her tone casual. The Willow Bend HOA president. A beat of silence. Then the director sighed. Of course it was. By the time we left that meeting, we had everything we needed, the paper trail, the false signatures, and proof of boundary manipulation. But Emily wasn't ready to go public, not yet. If we hit too early, she said, she'll play the victim. We'll make her comfortable first. Let her think she's winning. So we waited. Days passed with eerie calm. Karen's SUV kept cruising by, slower than before. More letters came, formal, threatening, dressed in polite language. We saved every one. The neighborhood continued its quiet routine, unaware that beneath its calm surface, two battles were unfolding, one of deceit, one of discipline. Late one night, long after the porch lights across the street had gone dark, Emily stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the cul-de-sac shimmer under a pale moon. You know, she murmured, people like her don't think they're lying. They just rewrite truth until it fits their comfort. I joined her, resting my hand on hers. And when truth finally shows up. She smiled, that quiet, dangerous kind of smile that said she already knew the ending. They call the cops, she said softly. And this time, they'll be calling me. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint echo of a neighborhood still asleep in ignorance. They had no idea what was coming. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of morning that starts too still, when even the birds sound like they're waiting for something. The sun had barely climbed over the rooftops when a sharp knock broke the silence. 3 raps. Official. Intentional. I opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers standing on the porch. Behind them, Karen's silver SUV idled at the curb, her window cracked just enough for me to see the tilt of her chin, smug, expectant, victorious. Sir, one of the officers began, we've received a complaint from the Willow Bend Homeowners Association regarding a property violation and trespass issue. The HOA president claims you're refusing lawful compliance and have interfered with their survey operations. I didn't say a word. Just stepped aside and called into the house. You'll want to see this. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, calm, measured. And then she appeared, her badge glinting faintly against her belt, not out of arrogance but as quiet truth. The younger officer's eyes widened before he could stop himself. Sheriff Monroe, he blurted. Karen's window rolled down another inch. I caught her expression shift, confusion creeping in like a slow frost. Emily folded her arms. Gentlemen, she said evenly, thank you for responding. I assume you're here under a civil complaint, not a criminal one? The older officer cleared his throat. Yes, ma'am. HOA jurisdictional matter. We were asked to mediate. She nodded. Then I suggest you let me handle it. It appears I'm both the subject and the authority in question. For a heartbeat, the world went silent, only the faint whir of the SUV's air conditioning breaking the tension. Karen stepped out, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, clutching her ever-present clipboard like a weapon. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "No one is above community law, sheriff or not. The board already voted." Emily reached calmly into her folder and handed over a document, sealed and stamped by the county zoning office. "Actually, Karen, that vote has been nullified. The county confirmed yesterday that your expansion petition was fraudulent, forged signatures, unauthorized amendments, and misuse of public documentation. I believe you'll be hearing from their legal division soon." The younger officer took the document, scanning it slowly, his eyebrows rising with each line. Karen's face drained of color. You can't do this." "I've worked for months, years, actually," Emily corrected softly. "And all that work unraveled the moment you decided to falsify records and harass homeowners outside your jurisdiction." The older officer stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, you might want to speak with your legal counsel before saying anything further." Karen's lips trembled, not from fear, but disbelief. The clipboard she'd once held like a crown now hung loosely at her side. What followed wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no grand gestures. Just the quiet sound of authority shifting back to where it belonged. Door creak. The officers stepped inside with us, verifying paperwork, confirming maps, cross-checking signatures. Every rustle of paper sounded louder than thunder. Pen scratch. Emily signed the official statement affirming our property's independent status, returning final jurisdiction to the county. Silence. Even Karen's SUV seemed smaller as she stood outside, watching the last illusion of control slip from her hands. But the story didn't end there. The next week, the county board held an open meeting. Attendance was mandatory for all registered HOAs. Karen showed up, pale and tight-lipped, flanked by her vice president and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The chairwoman of the zoning committee adjusted her glasses, tapped her pen against the microphone, and said simply, "Before we begin, Sheriff Monroe has submitted evidence regarding boundary tampering and fraudulent filings connected to Willow Bend Estates. These findings will be entered into public record." Every whisper in the room died instantly. Emily stepped to the podium, not in uniform, but in plain clothes, composed and steady. She laid out her findings with surgical precision, the falsified documents, the manipulated maps, the phantom signatures. Each fact landed like a quiet hammer, and by the end, the board members sat in stunned silence. When the gavel finally struck, the sound echoed through the chamber, a single, resonant note of justice. The verdict: the Willow Bend HOA's proposed boundary expansion was revoked, and its president, Karen Wells, was removed pending investigation for document fraud and harassment. Outside, the reporters gathered fast, their cameras flashing under the noon light. Karen turned away, shielding her face as microphones followed. But Emily didn't gloat. She simply walked past her, offered a polite nod, and said, "Community means honesty, Karen. You should have tried it." That night, as twilight spread across the hills, we sat on our porch again, same swing, same breeze, but everything felt lighter. The neighborhood, once tense with whispers, had gone quiet. Even the Johnsons waved again. Emily sipped her coffee, her badge nowhere in sight. "You know," she said softly, "justice doesn't always need noise." I nodded, watching the sun dip low behind the rooftops. Somewhere down the street, a moving truck's tail lights glowed, Karen's SUV hitched behind it. The wind stirred the trees, gentle now, almost forgiving. And in that stillness, I finally understood what Emily meant when she said she'd wait. Because revenge born from anger burns everything in its path. But justice born from patience heals what anger never could. Peace doesn't always arrive with applause, sometimes it slips in quietly, like the first breeze after a long storm. A few weeks after the hearing, the neighborhood began to sound different. Children's laughter returned to the cul-de-sac, lawnmowers hummed again without that nervous edge, and the mail no longer carried threats disguised as community notices. The air itself seemed lighter, as if the whole street had exhaled for the first time in months. Emily and I kept our lives simple. She went back to her duties at the sheriff's office, I tended the garden we'd nearly abandoned. Every morning, we'd sit on the porch swing, the same one that had once felt like a lookout post, and watch the sunlight crawl up over the hills. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about restoring quiet. A few neighbors stopped by with shy apologies. Even Don brought over a pie, shaking his head. "Guess we all got caught in her web," he said. Emily smiled and told him there were no hard feelings, that trust, once broken, takes time to mend, but it's worth the work. And she was right. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the wisdom that grows after it. I learned that from her, from the way she never let anger make her decisions, even when every part of me wanted to fight back. She reminded me that patience isn't weakness. It's strategy wrapped in grace. Now, when I see that empty house down the lane, Karen's old home, I don't feel triumph. Just a quiet sense of balance. She built her power on control, Emily rebuilt peace on truth. And truth, it turns out, doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs time. As the evening sun paints our porch in gold, I think back to everything we endured and realize the moral is simple: you can't force peace through power, only through integrity. The world has enough noise. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is silence that stands firm.